Good evening, President Wagers, trustees. We have a presentation for you tonight to talk about the myriad of services and supports we have within our schools and our community to support our students. As you know, we've had a tough quarter as far as student deaths, and so we just wanted to give you an update on some of the different things that we have. If you have questions along the way, please just ask. We don't need to wait to the end. So just go ahead and ask. And we're going to turn it over to Charisse.
President Wagers and trustees, the work we will share within the Student Support Services report this evening directly connects with our strategic plan. The Student Support Services report aligns with Goal 5, Strategy 2, and will provide an update on the progress within many of the key action items developed to support emotional safety of students and staff. I'm going to walk you through the crisis response protocol, which is the process that we follow when we are notified of a student or staff death. When we are notified, it's the family who determines what information can be shared to the school community. We cannot share any information that isn't first approved by them, and we work really hard to honor that and respect the family's wishes. We aim to provide a response that is tailored. We want to ensure that support is not being provided to the school, or that we want to ensure that the support that's provided is the support that the school determines is needed. And so what that looks like is a collaboration typically between district leadership, including Jason Shanks, our counseling supervisor, as well as the building principal and our crisis response team. We also want to make sure that the response is timely. It's important that we respect the family's wishes with regard to sharing information, but that we're also timely in informing staff, family, and students. And we want to do this in a way that's comprehensive as well as compassionate. During the 2023-24 school year, we have had 4 student deaths and 1 staff death in which we activated our crisis response team. We've also activated our crisis response team to support a charter school in the community when they were in a situation where they were just overwhelmed by circumstances and needed additional support. While each instance is unique, the toll that these tragedies play on students, staff, and the broader school community are significant.
President Wagers, trustees, I'm going to talk you a little bit through how our crisis team is launched and what that looks like when that happens. So I'm actually really glad to say that as of last year, at the end of last year, we realized that our crisis team, even in the end of last year, was responding to different deaths that were happening. And we realized our team wasn't big enough. So we asked the district to increase our team. Our team was actually doubled in size. So in the last few weeks of the year last year, and then at the beginning of the year this year, we started doing training, coming together and just going over what our crisis response is. If we are having a really good crisis response, you will know that we're there the first day, and then it will kind of phase out and you will not really know what's happening behind the scenes. So for right now, we have 11 members. We increased from 5 members to 11 members, school social workers, counselors, school psychologists. We are all trained in the PREPARE model through the National Association of School Psychologists, and it is a postvention response to any crisis. It's not necessarily to a student death. It could also be how you triage a school shooting. But we are there to work through that and to support a school with that. When there is a crisis, there are lots of things going on in the background. The directors are meeting, I'm meeting. We are determining the level of support that we can provide that school, what that will look like, what the need is, because every time we've responded, the need has been drastically different. With that level of response, we then activate our crisis team. And with our crisis team, I have to give a shout out to them because they drop everything at their school for that day And the ones that can make it, they are responding to the school that the crisis is at. So oftentimes a principal may not have a counselor then for a couple days because they are responding to that crisis. So when we get to the school, and let me take a step back to in the beginning of this year, even before the losses that we have had, we really wanted to see a focus on mental health. So we did have another mental health summit where we pulled all of our, or most of our administrators in, our student services teams, and we really challenged them to look at their own response within their school as well. They should have their school-based response for small situations that they can respond to. And then our district level crisis team comes in to support them in whatever need they may see. That can be from us just consulting. Maybe one person will go there just to see how it's going. And it could be to a situation where the school is so affected that they are unable to respond and that we kind of just take over for them and then meet with kids, help staff, and whatever is needed in that. So typically for a typical response, when our team is launched, it's 2 to 5 people. We always like to have more people than we are actually needing there because it's always easier to send people home than to call more people to come. When we come, we set up crisis rooms. And a crisis room is just a room with a counselor, a school psychologist, a school social worker that is then supporting the other staff that are there as well, where as we walk through that day and we do the reading at the beginning of the morning of what that was, and when I say we, the teachers or the school staff that are there, we then see that trickle effect of the students that are affected. And sometimes it's really easy to see those students. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it doesn't happen till later in the day and we kind of get waves. Our goal when we have these students come down, one, just providing a safe space. They are obviously upset. A lot of the times, if we did send something out the night before, those particular students that are really upset may not have heard yet. So we're just providing them a safe space, sometimes a safe space to cry, sometimes just a safe space with a safe adult to listen to them because they have a lot to say in that situation. But 2, we're assessing to see, okay, are you going to be okay for today? Or do you need to go home? And at a certain point, we try to talk with that student of, do you think you can make it back to class today? Obviously weighing what's an appropriate time, what's the circumstances, how closely they were connected, and then talking that student through that of, hey, do you think we should call mom? And sometimes it's call mom and just let her know I'm struggling. Sometimes it's call mom, please come get me. I can't do school for the rest of the day. So we really try to honor that. This often happens, the crisis happens, typically it's pretty rough the first day. In one of our responses this year, we saw over 105 students the first day with our crisis response. And many of those students went home. Many of those students were able to talk to an adult and go back to class. And they may have needed to come back down, but then they would go back to class, or we would call in therapy dogs and they could see those dogs, and just meeting that student wherever they are. Another piece of that's happening that morning is typically we're supporting the staff meeting that's taking place in the morning. If the staff already know, they may just be having a check-in just to see, how is everybody doing? Are you going to manage today? Because the effect ripples out pretty quickly. The students are affected, the staff are affected, the counselors at that school typically are affected, the administration, the families, and then after our crisis team is there and supporting students for that amount of time, they're also affected. So then giving them time to process and to sometimes not respond to the next one just because of it's difficult. So that's our immediate crisis response. So continuing to follow the prepare model, the next level of response is again based upon the need of the school. And that is typically directed by what they're seeing in the classrooms, what the counselors or social workers may be seeing, or what parents are saying that is needed as well. We oftentimes have parents reach out saying, my son or daughter is really struggling. So that first phase is the true crisis. The next phase, dependent, again, every situation is different, could be a multitude of things. One of those could be giving education, just checking in with all students if it was a pretty pervasive crisis. 2 would then be analyzing and seeing which students are frequent flyers, because we track those students that are coming down just so we know to follow up, and just so we have a spreadsheet so those counselors that are at that school can then follow up again later down the road. So looking at, do we need a education for these 30 affected students to know what the stages of grief are, how they could be responding in the next few weeks, letting them know that it could look in many different ways, and providing them that support then too. And then our third one is our grief groups. So some students are very close, some students are just triggered from other things. And we realize typically 1 to 3 weeks down the road that we need to come back in and either partner with an agency that comes in and does a grief group, or our social workers or counselors would typically then also support with a grief group. So it's a multifaceted, multi-level response to these different crises that we have. And kind of switching a little bit, just, I know part of what was asked that we talk about today is with suicide as well too. So with our suicide prevention, we're not alone in this. And I said this before, we are experiencing this as a community. We are experiencing this as a state. We know of 7 student suicides just within the Valley this school year. That's 7. That's 7 more than I want to have. That's a lot. Looking throughout the state, when I pulled the numbers this last week, we've had 105 student deaths by suicide in the state so far between 2018 and 2022. This is something that has been happening in Idaho. We've heard the statistics for years now that mental health and suicide is a major concern in Idaho, and it's happening all throughout the state. The other thing that I've seen with the stats that I was pulling is we've had 21 students reported that have committed suicide or completed suicide this year. Typically, in the past years, and I have a little graph right here, we see 18-ish about this time of year, and throughout the end of the year, even for last year, the stats kind of contradicted each other. At one point, it said there was 23 by the end of last year, and there was 20 by the end of last year. So I don't know which one of those stats was correct, so I put them both there. So we are seeing that there is a need and that there is something going on where we want to support our students, and it looks somewhat similar the past few years, unfortunately.
What we're going to talk about next is that the Boise School District has many different programs and initiatives that we have in place to support mental and health and emotional well-being of our students. And while we have many programs in our district, we also know that as a community that we can do more. Jason and I are going to talk to you a little bit about some of the influences that impact a student's mental health and emotional well-being.
So the mental health and well-being of our students is obviously of the utmost importance to all of us, and is really a top priority for our school district. As we continue to strive to search for ways to enhance the levels of support that we're able to provide our students, as Terry said, it's really important for us to understand some of the contributing factors to mental health of our students. And so it goes far beyond the individual themselves. And so if you look at this graphic and you start with the outermost layer and you just think of society, there are societal factors that involve any perceived inequalities where students sometimes just feel as though maybe they don't measure up because they might not have the wealth or material goods that some of their classmates may have. There are also issues with racism and just discrimination in general that kind of tear a student's mental health down as well. And so those societal factors are hugely important.
Some of the influences on the mental health of young people can also be their environment. Is their neighborhood safe? Do they have healthy food? Do they have decent health care? Are there green spaces where they can go and enjoy nature and get fresh air, exercise? Is there housing that is adequate? Do they live in a polluted area? And have they experienced any kind of natural disasters within their neighborhood and their environment?
Another critical element in impacting a student's mental health are the local community factors. So the people with whom they're closest in life. So whether that's their peers, their friends, classmates, teachers, coaches, everyone around them. And those relationships also bring an element of either lifting someone's mental health and spirit up or tearing it down.
We all know from the community aspect that it's important to have healthy relationships with adults in our schools, but it's also really impactful to have healthy relationships in your family. So if a student experiences issues with relationships with their parents, with their siblings, without other family members, that can contribute to their mental health. Also financial instability, domestic violence, and if they experience any kind of trauma, it can all impact their mental health.
And then as you get down to the core on this graphic, you get to the very personal element, the individual piece, which these are, when you look at the outer rings, they're mostly things that are external. But when you look at this individual piece, you're now looking at things that are very internalized and really out of an individual's control, such as a person's age, genetics, race, those types of factors. And then just the coping skills also that someone may or may not have developed to this point in their life. And with that, we will turn it back over to Jason.
Trustee Langley, 1 sec.
A quick question. I just wanted to confirm that the last slide that we saw, you got that from U.S. Public Health Services?
Correct.
Okay, thanks. I just want to confirm that.
And Trustee Gregory.
So I just wanted to make a comment. I'm trying to think how many years ago, probably 15 years ago, the community did a community-wide survey of all students and probably secondary students in the Valley. And it was a collaborative effort with the city of Boise and churches and schools. And based on the data, which were very much aligned with the chart that you just showed, all those organizations set goals. And I just remember the city specifically just graphed spots in the city where there were low services, low support for families, and that green space piece. And they made plans to make significant goals and steps to improve those kinds of things. And I remember one of the benefits. I mean, at that time I had teenagers in high school, and the one thing I heard from them was, somebody cares what our life is like. And that really had an impact on me. So I was thrilled to see the survey that we just did initially give us some readings on this. But the thing that I remember from that previous one was how much of a community involvement there was by many organizations that felt they could impact the quality of life of our young people. So here we are again.
And Trustee Gregory, I think you hit it with Boise as a youth initiative. That's, I think, kind of where they're going again. I encourage you to come and be there and support that initiative, because that is exactly, we're trying to get people rallied around. How do we support students? How do we support each other? How do we support families? Because this isn't just a student issue. This is a family issue on every level that's dealing with this. So great point. I'm hoping we're headed back in that direction.
President Wagers.
Trustee Oppenheimer.
Thank you. I have one comment and one question. I think it's important to note that Idaho has a really high ACEs score amongst children. And for those of you who don't know what that is adverse childhood experiences. And Idaho right now stands at 23% of children have 2 or more ACEs, and that is 2% higher than the national average. And so our children as young as even birth to 5 are experiencing some pretty high adverse childhood experiences coming into our schools. So I think it's important to note that. My question is I think that a lot of us remember our last legislative session, a bill was passed. I think it was called the Parents' Rights Act or something like that. And that essentially, well, let me ask you this. Do you feel like that bill has handcuffed our teachers and our counselors from being able to talk to students who they see might be experiencing some challenges, either emotionally, socially, or something like that? I know that it's impacted our survey that we just did. We had to change to opt in as opposed to opt out. And so we're not really getting the information that we need from our students. So do you feel like that bill has handcuffed our students or our teachers? Are they scared to talk to students about their mental health issues? Because if they do without talking to the parents first, they might get in trouble or something like that. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can. I think initially when we learned about the parents' rights bill, everybody was scared. Everybody was worried that they were going to get in trouble for talking about mental health. If they said the wrong thing, the parents were going to come after them. And once everybody settled down, it really is, if there was a concern from a teacher or a counselor, even before this bill, we would have been calling the parents. That's what we do. We communicate with the parents. Anytime we see something that is kind of off and we see that's been off for a little bit, that's just best practice. We want to loop the parents in and we want to connect and get the best support we can for those students. So I think there was maybe initially, but I think we're back in a better place now, if that answers that question.
Can follow up, please?
Go ahead, Trustee Oppenheimer.
Thank you. Do you think that bill has prevented us from this recent health survey that we did? Do you think that it has prevented participation in that?
That bill 100% made our participation go down. Absolutely. So we had over 7,500 students that opted or not opted in. 7,500 students approximately that took it last year. We had roughly 4,000 that opted in this year. And that was after emails, text messages, remind messages, more emails, another memo, to the point of where parents are saying, please stop sending us stuff. We've already opted in. So absolutely that affected us. And it actually affected us enough that our data is on the verge of not being usable data. We just don't have enough of it.
So it's fair to say that it is handcuffed us in getting the information that we need from students to be able to address. I mean, we know that there's issues, right? But every time that we can survey students and really get the feedback from students who that we need to hear from, and maybe the parents, for whatever reason, don't want that student to take that survey, or they're not engaged, or they're not involved. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
President Wagers.
Trustee Osmondari.
Thank you. Yeah, great comment, Trustee Oppenheimer. I was curious, I know like that bill was a lot of things, right? The Parents' Rights Act obviously had a great name too. And I know Superintendent of Public Instruction, Kirchfield, supported it. I was curious if we have communicated that our survey results are essentially invalid, null and void, thanks to the low participation. If we've been able to communicate that to the legislature, and maybe Mr. Shanks, you could talk to that. And then Trustee Gregory, I was wondering if there is an opportunity to bring something like that to ISBA to just amend something in there specifically around the opt-in for mental health assessment programs.
President Wagers.
Superintendent Dennis.
Trustee Rajmandari, the short answer is yes, we've communicated that with the legislature, but I want us to be careful here in that, we are working on this issue, and I don't want to get away from the issue that we're talking about tonight versus the survey bill that was done in the legislature. We've communicated our concerns. We've seen a decrease in the participation of the survey. But I don't want us to think that we can't get any information out of this survey. We still should look at it, still should look at the results of it and use it to the best of our abilities. But I would just like to remind the board at this stage of the game that this presentation isn't on the survey or the bill. It is truly on our response to crisis and suicide.
President Wagers, follow up to that.
Trustee Rajmandari.
Is there a way we can accurately assess the mental health and well-being of our students?
It sounds like they're going to talk about that in just a few slides. It sounds like Becca will be
awesome.
talking about that.
Okay.
Before we have big, broad questions, maybe we should let them finish the presentation.
Okay, y'all got it.
Okay, so if we go back to our next slide and then even reflecting on what Jason and Terry presented on, I keep coming back to it takes a community. We saw all those different levels of support that are really needed for wraparound services for a student when they're struggling with their mental health or if they're struggling with thoughts of suicide. And we have certain things that we can control and we have partners, but just this slide is just kind of a review of some of the services that we do offer. One of the things I really like to point out as I was sitting here though and listening to Petra talk is oftentimes we think of a school counselor or a school social worker or a career counselor, someone that's doing a very specific thing. And as she was talking, I was like, oh, the counselors do that. And a lot of the times we don't know all of the different things counselors or social workers have their hands in. So just a few of the things that she mentioned was Red Ribbon Week. Absolutely, they have a hand in that with having students make healthy choices. The college fair, our career counselor at Boise High was the person that was behind that. And then the movie Like that happened at South, that is absolutely tied to what we're trying to teach students with social media and how that can have a negative effect on their mental health and oftentimes can go down that road to thoughts of suicide. So just, it was a really nice tie-in that Petra did, and I thought I'd mention that here. The other parts of this as well with that wraparound services piece is we're still partnering with several mental health agencies, 13 different ones that may have even just changed in the past 2 days. It's very fluid. We're getting new people that are coming in, and we have sometimes agencies that shut down or people that move out. We also, that one that's not on here, is we also even are partnering with substance abuse agencies that are supporting students through substance use assessments, or we have parent nights, or sorry, we have students that are taking drug classes. They all go together. All of these things go hand in hand together. So to further even dig deeper in that, there are varieties of groups that are offered. We also even just sent out with one of the memos that went out offering to families, because we know sometimes students won't come forward at the junior highs or high schools saying, hey, I need extra support. So there is a form out there right now that we have families that can sign up for support for their student, whether educational, whether a grief group, whatever that looks like. And we sent it, I mean, if you think about Boise Quad, we sent it to over 2,000 students' families. We've had 9 parents sign their kid up for support. So we've got to figure out how we can capture these kids more than we really are, or what we're seeing in the schools right now. Other thing that we hit on was that student well-being survey. We have our hotline posters that are up, so students know to text 988 or call 988. And then we also have different trainings that have been taking place and will continue to take place about suicide awareness for staff, for counselors. We also have people going to CARES training, even how to discuss. We actually had one today. Well, how do you discuss with a student if they are at risk of neglect or abuse or things like that? And then every year we have our vector trainings that are mandatory, that are completed by every staff member in the district. All right. So I know one of the other things that's been asked a lot is, what are we doing as a preventative measure? And we do have sources of strength in a couple of the high schools and sources of strength in all of the elementaries. So every elementary student is getting sources of strength. And I will tell you, this is still a building block. When I was meeting with an 8th grade student last week who was in crisis, I asked that student, what are your strengths? And she asked me, what are you talking about? I said, I looked you up. You went to an elementary in the Boise School District. What are one of your strengths from sources of strength? And that student immediately told me, oh, my grandma. my dog. Oh, I see an outside counselor. I'm in this group. I'm in this. So it was really cool to see something that had been built off of at an education or an elementary level that they could still pull from. And that was really the intention of the sources of strength when we adopted it several years ago now for our elementary people. Oftentimes is what I found out just recently, the students weren't associating it with suicide because in 5th and 6th grade, it seems a little bit scary to talk about suicide. I will tell you, I've been on multiple email chains now where that has been the focus of those lessons. They're not being hesitant anymore to actually talk about it in that aspect. It is things that, or they are things that we can pull from as coping skills, but they are directly affected with mental health and thoughts of suicide as well.
President Wagers.
Trustee Rajmandari.
Dr. Shanks, does talking about suicide, it doesn't have an effect on odds of suicide, right?
Research says that typically it does not. We can't speak for everybody, but typically it does not. So there's other things that definitely are going on in the district. I was walking through a junior high and saw CRIM, our community resiliency model, training posters, and that is just how to regulate your nervous system. If you can regulate your nervous system, then you can handle the stresses better. Staff and students are being trained in that. And then there's just oddball things that are kind of out there too. Art for Wellbeing, there's Zen dens, there's just different safe places in all these different schools where if students are struggling, they can go, they can decompress, or they can integrate that into their class. So there's so many things wrapping around supporting these students, and we're always, as part of that responsive culture, looking for other ways that we can do it in addition or do it better as well.
A couple more things that are school led. We made them mention of social media and some concerns. So Go Guardian Beacon is actually a program or a filter that we have in all of our schools. It notifies the student, the school team, and the parent when it detects a student's activity on the Chromebook that's issued by our district. Indicates they may be actively planning suicide. It's based on online behaviors that indicate the student is doing that, and then it notifies the person closest to the student. It notifies school teams by email during the school days and hours, and then it notifies students by a pop-up and parents by email any other time. Well, actually any time, but also in the off hours when active planning is detected. So this would be if a student got on and did a Google search. School teams review the alert and immediately make contact with the student. And every school has worked through who's going to be on that team, who's the backup to the person that might take the first call, who's going to make contact with that student. So that's one method that we are using to kind of keep students safe. And it's important too, because, we're putting Chromebooks in their hands. So we want to make sure that we're making sure that they're being safe when they're using them.
President Wagers.
Trustee Rajmandari.
I was wondering, do you know how many interventions have been made based on that Go Guardian system? I just suspect that if someone were planning something, it would be on a phone.
Trustee Rajamandari, we don't have exact numbers on that. That's a daily occurrence in schools where something will pop. Because, for instance, like when the health teacher does a semester or a unit on, like suicide prevention, a lot of times we'll all of a sudden get a flurry of Go Guardian Beacon alerts. And so they're happening a lot in schools. So I don't think we have necessarily, I'm looking at Will, because no, we don't. Okay. Checking with the chief technology officer. So. The other thing that actually Petra mentioned was that we did a social media awareness for families event at South. This film is about becoming more aware and really understanding and being empowered in your own use of social media. And we got really great turnout. 58 families RSVP'd, but we approximated about 120 families and people showed up for that. And so it's a really, it's an event that we hope to replicate. And just like the kids were talking about, maybe bringing it to other high schools
it was a really good first step in helping students have a healthier relationship with social media. Now I'm going to turn over to Brian.
Good evening, trustee President Wagers and trustees. Last spring at the end of the year, actually at the end of the school year, and I actually think it was the last day of the school year, we were made aware of an opportunity through Boise State, through an initiative that they have. It's called Bronco Bold. It's been going for multiple years now at Boise State. They received funding late in the year to branch out and build an ambassador program with Idaho high schools. And for this first year, they had 4 schools slots, and we were able to get 3 of our high schools in that, including Bora, Timberline, and Capital. And we're hopeful we'll be able to get Boise High into it next year. You can see up there the purpose of it. Really, there's 3 areas that they operate in. The focus is on around mental health, and really there's 3 things that they're trying to do: reducing stigma around mental health, raising awareness, and cultivating resilience. And they do that through working with the high school teams to help them build initiatives at each of the high schools. And you saw a little bit of that last month in Bora's report. They had some things that were sprinkled in, and I'm going to have Scarlett and Petra share a little bit more about some of the things they've been doing this year. But to give you a basic structure, at each of those high schools, we have an advisor and a core group of student athletes from across all different sports that work together. They hold monthly meetings, and they make a plan for the initiative and what that looks like at their school. They're supported through Boise State, student athletes from Boise State. They have curriculum that they're provided through Boise State. And what I'm excited about is it's not just raising awareness, but it's also focused around giving skills and providing skills that students can use, not just student athletes, but all students can use to help them cope with the different things they come across in life. So Petra, oh, you're right here.
Hi again. I'm Scarlett from Bora High School. I'm one of the 5 ambassadors for Bora Bold this year. We kickstarted our initiative for Suicide Prevention Week this September. We involved, it started off as a mainly student athlete program, but we're connecting with our whole school. But we're using our athletes and our school leaders, like captains of the teams, to help spread the message and get involved. So at Bora, what we did is we got into contact with all of the captains and athletes and coaches, and we had them, thanks to Bronco Bold, we were able to get a bunch of merch and like the blue and teal ribbon that you can see up there. And we got a bunch of patches and stickers, and we were able to make a bunch of rowdy towels too that we had at the game that week, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So what we did kicking off Suicide Prevention Week is we had all of our athletes and school teams pose with them at their meets and competitions at that week. So you can see our cross country team in the corner. So we had them, and then we had them spread them on their social media platforms and raise awareness for that 988 number again. Not only that they can contact it for suicide, but any mental health crisis. And if they're feeling out of control and left out, they should be able to feel free to reach out and contact, because everyone, students, athletes, we all struggle at some points, and you should know that you're not alone. Following that week, we had a chalk walk. We did this with our student council, and we teamed up with our Art for Wellbeing, which is a new class at Bora. We had them start it. So that was one of their projects, and they made it that week. And then throughout the Bora Quad, we had it all throughout positive messages like, you got this, we believe in you, you're not in this alone. And that was really fun. It got washed away in the rain about 2 days later, but it was really fun while it lasted. Also that week, we had a football game. So what we did is we got our rowdies involved, and they made a bunch of Bora towels supported by student council, and we spread those out at the game. And we once again raised awareness for that 988 number with our cheer team and the patches. and it was a really great experience. I just remembered that was just Suicide Prevention Week. We've continued this initiative. Not only have we continued to do posters and stuff, but we have our video announcements and daily announcements. So we'll spread facts, and we have a mindful minute each. We're trying to do each week. It's turning into every other week because we're so busy. But we do a mindful minute. Our recent one was 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste, kind of as a way to calm yourself down. And we talked about that. We're going to do a gratefulness one before, and it's going to come out before Thanksgiving break to go with the theme. But that's how we're continuing to implement that throughout the school year.
President Wagers, Board of Trustees, hello again. So while I'm not directly in Bronco Bold, we've done a lot of stuff to partner with student council to increase awareness around obviously student athletes, but also outside of that. And so we also held a suicide awareness week, but we really tried to shift the narrative to what we live for. And so by this, we were hoping to help kids find the things that make our lives good, the things to look forward to, the things that are worth living for. And I think that this widely increased our participation in our activities. A lot of the things we did also mirrored Board, as we're all for the same mission. So we held a Chalk the Walk, which was super successful. We held it at break, and we all had people out at the front entrance giving supportive messages. We also handed out the ribbons to all the sport teams to just raise awareness, because we truly believe that the more we talk about it, hopefully we can address both awareness and prevention. And the more it's talked about, it's tied to the prevention aspect of it. And so part of our Suicide Awareness Week, with our new narrative of what we live for at the volleyball game, because we did not have a football game that week, we had a table where you could fill out a sticky note and say like what you live for. And that we went and we kind of like summarized all the things we found, and it ranged from people that you're grateful for, school things that are coming up, a birthday, even things like the chicken at Albertsons. That one stood out to us. But these are all things that kids live for, and it doesn't matter what it is. We're just hoping the kids grasp onto these things and realize that everyone is there to support them and the things they live for. And we're hoping that we can continue the Bronco Bolts. Yeah, thank you.
President Wagers, trustees. So you can see there's a very comprehensive, our approach is quite comprehensive to this issue. And like Jason Shank said, this really is a state and a national issue, right? So what's next? So we know it takes a village to raise a child. We cannot do this work alone. It really is going to be like the graphic that Terry and Jason went through. It's going to be community. It's going to be our family, our schools. We need everyone to kind of rally behind and do this work. So we really are engaging, Trustee Gregory, like you were saying, with the greater community of what can we do and how can we get subcommittees to look at different areas of need. So you guys can read this, but we're using our data to inform gaps. We are working diligently with our community partners to attract mental health partners to come in our schools. Like you saw on a slide, I think we have 10 schools waiting for an outside mental health provider. So as soon as we have one, we've got a spot to put them in. And we really are exploring additional research-based intervention programs for teens, including further expansion of our current district suicide prevention programs. So it's really important to us that we are, that last bullet, looking at research-based intervention programs, and that we have a kind of a systematic approach. So the next slide talks about our school partners. So we have been.
Stacey, I think Trustee Oppenheimer has a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. This is actually a question for Jason Shanks, if possible. As a parent of a high school student, I'm certainly well aware of some of the bullying behavior that we're seeing on social media. And my question is, what is the process for students when they are, I guess, being bullied on social media? What can they do? And I know a lot of students won't talk to their parents about it, but if they do, which is great, what is also the process for parents to address social media bullying, nasty comments, just making people feel pretty bad about themselves? What does that process look like for both students and or parents?
I can give you a general 10,000 feet overview. Hopefully we're always wanting our students to talk to either their parents, or if not their parents, if they don't feel comfortable talking to their parents, talking to some trusted adult to let them know, whether it's at the school, whether it's the SRO, just making sure that that is reported. As a parent, I think you have a few options, that and every situation is different again. So using your professional judgment as a parent, as a professional, and deciding what are the next steps. Does this warrant a call to the school? Is it affecting school? Does this warrant checking in with the SRO at the school? A lot of times we don't necessarily see them as a resource, but they are really a resource that a parent can use, and letting them guide through, is this something we can go that direction, or is this something we want to go a different direction with? I would strongly encourage that parent, if that was you, to talk to that administrator at that school and explore what the next steps are.
Thank you.
Trustee Greeley.
Thank you, President Wagers. I wanted to ask a question. I love hearing the next steps, but I want one question before that was something that Stella brought up earlier. And what supports do we have for staff?
Great. I was going to mention this a little bit as well. So one of the things that we have done this year that we have never done before is we have our HR director, Jason Hutchinson, worked really hard with our EAP, and especially, it's our employee assistance program that provides counseling services for our staff. So we have free sessions we can go to, and in the time of a crisis, that EAP provider has been coming and coming to that first staff meeting and talking to the staff there and letting them know, like, hey, it's okay if you're not feeling regulated and not okay right now. And they're setting up shop for a couple hours within the school. Staff members can go to the EAP, and if they're in crisis mode too, then they can triage that and then hopefully get them set up one of two things. One, with EAP, they've been opening appointments up until 8 o'clock at night to have like emergency appointments for that week, or sometimes the following 2 weeks. And then if not with them, that's okay too. They can help find a referral out in the community that would also support them that way. The second thing they've been doing is critical stress debriefing groups. And we had this at a junior high a couple times last year. And actually they just completed I want to say either a third or fourth one. And that is having the staff come back in, those that want to, and regulating, checking in where they're at, processing, and seeing how they can really get back to maybe a baseline and at least be okay sometimes even within their building, but also then be okay to be teaching students too, because we know we have to be taking care of ourselves before we can ever teach a student. And so I've been really proud that we've done that this year, that we are working with staff as well. We also have some other ideas I just floated to that I'm excited to see if they come to fruition, but staff is part of our concern as well right now.
We also have some of our staff using their CLC time to take a deeper dive into CRIM, which is that community resiliency model. So that's another way that our staff is taking care of themselves. And when that is pervasive in a school and the kids have that same language and the teachers have that same language, we're really seeing some great success with that.
I was also just trying to meet with a counselor, just putting things very to the forefront, as they made one of their activities at their school was pickleball for wellness. So just getting creative of how can you connect with staff? How can you make this year feel okay? And how can you be okay in your school. So that's happening at a couple different schools now, just that connection piece. And let's make this a little bit lighter because that's needed as well. I've always said, if I'm not going to work and liking my job and liking the people I'm working with and laughing, I don't want to go. So how do we recreate some of that?
Okay, so we have been partnering with Communities for Youth, which is a partnership with the City of Boise, St. Luke's, Boise School Districts, and Communities for Youth. And that's where we really can have a call to action for our community, because there are lots of different aspects to getting this information, to collecting the data, to looking at the data, to making plans for the community. So we have partnered, like I said, for 3 years with Communities for Youth to really look at this, like I said, this epidemic that's in Idaho, but also nationwide. So we have a meeting coming up, another community meeting with Communities for Youth, where different community members can come and hear, and then, like I said, get into different subcommittees to help with this issue. So with that, I think that's our last one. We will stand for any questions.
Okay. Trustee Benyon.
Thank you, President Wagers. I guess I would just like to start by expressing my appreciation to all of you, the crisis teams, the school-based teams, the teachers, the peer students. I mean, we're doing everything in your power to keep our students safe and well so that they can continue to show up in our classrooms and learn. So I just want to extend that to start with. I'm also and I really appreciate the community level response that you're all taking to this. It absolutely has to happen at all levels. This is a public health issue that the district can't handle alone. It needs to be something we're working on together. And I know that's the intent. And actually that is the work that's being done. So thank you for that. I guess I do have one question. Is there anything in particular you feel like you don't have that would be helpful in your efforts to continue the work you're doing?
Trustee Wagers, Trustee Benyon, or President Wagers, Trustee Benyon, it's a great question. I can speak for myself, and then I'd love any of our team to jump in. One thing we have seen is typically when we have these Community for Youth meetings, there's been about 30-ish people, I'll say, and probably 10 to 15 our school district. So we really do need the community. We need parents. We need everyone that is part of this community to be at that table. So that's from my perspective. Okay.
President Wagers.
Trustee Greeley.
Thank you, President Wagers. I'm kind of reiterating a little bit of what Trustee Benyon said, but I do appreciate the work that's gone into supporting our students during crisis, and you even said this in the first slide, respecting the families that are grieving. You know, it's hard because we all want the information right away, but that there's a piece that we need to be cognizant of. I so am grateful for what you have in place for our staff, because this has got to be just so painful for them as well. But I think one of the really important things that I heard tonight, and I know our district does a good job, our leadership does a good job of making thoughtful decisions, that basically making sure that we're looking at research-based interventions, because we don't have the answers yet. It's not an easy solution, but I really appreciate that you're looking forward on things that are going to be proven to help our students and staff. So that's just kind of my thank you.
President Wagers, Trustee Greeley, thank you for saying that, because that is something suicide prevention, that is not our expertise, but there are lots of research based. So we want to be diligent to make sure we are doing, we research it and have a research based prevention program.
Trustee Langley.
Thank you guys again, as everyone said, for the hard work that we're doing here. You mentioned that we have 10 schools waiting for mental health professionals, and we've also doubled our crisis support team. I know that Idaho is in a crisis of a lack of mental health professionals, and we see that reflected in our district. Can you tell me a little bit more about how we're partnering to try to get as much as we can there? And also, I wanted to follow that up with, I see that we are building our response in a partnership with St. Luke's as one of our partners. And I just wanted to commend you guys again with utilizing experienced professionals in moving forward with this crisis response. So how are we bringing those professionals in?
Okay. So, Trustee Langley, we have Andrea Garrity, who you all have met many times. So she kind of takes the lead for us. So she is out there scouring, meeting with all of the outside mental health providers to see what mental health providers they have that can come into the schools. She vets them. She goes through a whole process. And so she is taking the absolute lead on that. And she, like I said, I know she works all of her connections and she's out there all the time. Jason, is there any? I think that's, that really is how it's just, there's a shortage across the state. So, and we're being very flexible. So if they can come one day, we'll take them for one day. If they can come 2 mornings, we'll take them for 2 mornings. So we're being very flexible with their schedule.
Superintendent Dennis.
President Wagers, Trustee Langley, it's a great question. Your question is probably at the heart of one of the things that we struggle with the most. Getting resources into our schools to help our kids is probably one of the most important things we do. We are reaching out right now, in addition to St. Luke's, the communities of youth, sources of strength, to groups like the Speedy Foundation, to Hope Squad, which I believe, Jason, if I'm not mistaken, is being used in Utah statewide as a part of a suicide prevention initiative in Utah. So the partners, I think probably more than anything else that I would like to say to the community is we'll take whatever help we can get right now. If you have ideas, reach out to us. Contact Jason Shanks, Andrea Garrity. We'll vet whatever program people would like us to look at, because we're looking at all options for where we are right now. But to what Stacy said earlier, we need the community to be a part of this. So thank you for that question.
Trustee Gregory.
Thank you, President Wagers. It just occurs to me that I've been going to the fall litany of grandchildren concerts and competitions. And I just want to say that I think a significant contribution to the mental health of youth is the arts. And I'm talking about, creation of art, performance art, music, theater, those kinds of things. It's like when you're standing in the foyer waiting for your kids to come out so you can congratulate them. They're coming out on a high. They've just experienced something that is a group connection that does something really challenging, and they nail it, and they are high. I mean, I shook hands with some kid I knew at church. He goes, "Do I know you?" And he was not interested in me. He was looking for his buddies who had stood next to him in that concert. So thank you to those who are in our arts professions in our schools, because they're giving kids expression, opportunity to express, to be a part of a team that work hard, that are focused and disciplined. Those are some of the things that get those endorphins going, that help, with all the chemical things that in your body track. I could just go on and on, but I think that parents encouraging their kids to put those on their class schedules is a powerful thing. And my kids knew from the very beginning they had to take an art. And they could choose, but it had to be an art, music, or athletic activity, something that in their day they were active. So that's my soapbox.
Trustee Gregory, our schools, as you heard from our student speakers today, are trying everything they can to get kids involved, whether it's Club Rush at lunch, whether some schools are doing staff versus students karaoke at lunchtime, right? So anything, whether it is the arts, but they're also being very mindful of kids that how can we fit it in during their day, at lunch, at break? What are some things we're doing to make those connections? So we agree with you.
President Wagers.
President Wagers, I just wanted to add to kind of dovetail a little bit on what was being said. The Bronco Bold presentation is something that I think is really, really important in what we're talking about. And it's because it's the student ownership of this problem. And we all know that the research will say trusted adult, but also trusted friends and community around those kids. So to just be the latest to thank the students that have talked about this and have invested in it. I think it's going to be a critical component in where we go long term, is that student ownership of their community. So I just wanted to give a shout out to you guys in the back row one more time.
All right, Trustee Rajmandari.
Thank you, President Wagers, and thank you for this presentation. And I do just want to reiterate, yeah, you guys have worked really hard the last few weeks, and I really appreciate it. That being said, it's difficult to say like we're doing a great job when we're continuing to see these problems. I was wondering, you mentioned the mental health specialists who are bringing in to address the most needy students, but I was curious about what we saw with our results from the study last year is that a large portion of our students are experiencing mental health incidents, a much higher portion than we're able to respond to with mental health specialists. And I was curious about the student to counselor ratio in our schools. I know we had some public comment about that as well. I know at the school where the recent deaths have happened, that student counselor ratio it's our highest in our district. It's 355 to 1. 355 students to 1 counselor. And I know from my experience at the beginning of the semester, at the end of the year, during times of high stress, that's when counselors tend to be least available because they're working on registering students for classes, responding to like infinite campus problems. But that's when students might need those counselors the most. And I was curious if you believe that our schools are adequately equipped, if our counselors have adequate capacity to meet the mental health needs of the general student.
Superintendent Dennis.
President Wagers, Trustee Rajmandari, I don't know that I'm going to answer your question as directly as I think you were hoping I would. One of the things I will say is that the definition of the mental health that we're dealing with our kids is a critical component to what we're talking about. If you're asking me a question directly about whether or not our counselors have the capacity to do ongoing therapy with kids, the short answer is no. They do not. I think that our counselors are there to provide periodic help with students. I think they're there to provide, allow students to get to resources that are available in the community. I think those are the things our school counselors are designed to do. So if you ask me if I think we are adequately staffed with our counseling, I don't know that I have a good answer to that question. I think what I do know is that we have resources available. Could we use more? Of course, we always can use more. But given where we are right now, I think the short answer to your question is I don't think we are set up, nor should we be set up to provide ongoing therapy for kids.
Right, right. Do you know if counselors, Director Shanks, I asked you this question, I think on Friday, and I think you said you get back to me. I was curious, do counselors have the authority to provide medical exemptions for students related to mental health? I know in many other states, boards have enacted policies to allow students to take a certain number of days off for mental health without adding towards their absences. And I was curious, is that something that school counselors, like, can they provide that medical exemption?
Yeah, Superintendent Dennis.
Yeah, Trustee Rajmandari, I'm going to take that question as well. The short answer is we should be communicating with our families about what the needs of the kid is. When we find ourselves in a situation where a kid is working or needing some help, communicating with the family and the kid is the key to deciding whether or not something is or isn't counted against their attendance. We should never be so restrictive in our attendance policies that we're not willing to listen to the need of the kid. So I don't know if I can say anything more direct than that. I use this with our staff a lot, and so I'm going to say it out loud, and I typically wouldn't say this out loud, but I'm going to say it here.
Okay.
Policies are just that, policies. If all I need is for an administrator to read me the policy, I don't need the administrator. I just need the book. I need people to apply policies. And we should always be looking at what's the best need or the best interest of the kid above all else. So that's my direct answer. So can students take mental health days? Of course they can. If they're in contact with the parents and they know what's going on, the short answer is of course they can.
Thank you. That clears things up. Thank you. President Wishers, I do have some more questions, but if there's other folks.
Go ahead, Trustee Rajmandari.
Thank you. I was curious about, you talked about comprehensive response, right? And so from what I understand, we're talking about QPR training for certain students. We're providing the Bronco Bowl program for athletes. And then, meeting the specialists, we're bringing specialists into schools to meet the needs of the students with the most diverse needs. But to me, when I think of comprehensive response and I think of the coping skills that all students need to succeed, especially with mental health incidence rates that are as high as we're seeing, I think of curriculum. And I'm curious what moves what are we looking at right now as far as integrating curriculum on coping with depression, anxiety, suicide response, so that all students receive that, preferably at all grade levels, since 8th grade and 11th grade health. I know I took those. I don't remember there was a lot about suicide, but also students deal with mental health in 6th grade and 7th grade and 9th and 10th and 12th grade as well.
President Wagers, Trustee Rajmandari, I think Superintendent Dennis said before, right now we're exploring all options. We are looking at what we can supplement better. We're looking at maybe what we don't want to do anymore. Part of that conversation, as he said, has been Hope Squad. Part of it's been, are we going to further extend sources of strength? Where are the opportunities that we could put this, or where are opportunities for us to start talking with students? I think all options are on the floor right now.
And I'm curious, Mr. Shanks, also, if you could talk about school start times. And I know this is kind of a hot button topic. From what I understand, school start times.
Trustee Rajmandari, I think you're getting off topic because we're talking about suicide and crisis response.
Right. And so what I'm curious is to what extent do school start times influence mental health incidence rates around the country?
Okay, once again, I think you're off topic. We've talked about that separately several times, and that would be a separate topic for a school board meeting.
Okay.
Just President Wagers, just as a reminder to us all, we have a policy to stay on our agenda at all times. It's been a few times tonight that we've wandered off of it. But we also have to provide that agenda to people ahead of time so they can come and comment on it to the public. So we can't bring up items that are not on the agenda.
Trustee Gregory.
Thank you, President Wagers. I appreciate the presentation tonight, mostly because it's kind of like all hands on deck, thinking about the problem. And I believe that as we reach out into the community and respond to this situation in our community and with our young people, we're going to invite everybody to be involved. And that really is what is the key and the answer, because schools cannot bear the total responsibility of providing therapy for young people. We have an atmosphere and a job and a purpose, which is outlined in our charter, to educate the children. And our goal is to educate children to be good citizens and go into life as lifelong learners. And that's our focus. But we have lots of supports around that. And we're also engaging our parents and our families in a collective effort to act in the best interest of young people. And so to say that, we need to now have K-12 suicide prevention as a part of every curriculum, I think there's a more effective way to do that. And I believe that you guys have pinpointed some really important ways that can happen. And we've engaged our students in ideas. We're reaching out to the community with ideas. We have community reaching out to us with ideas. We have partners that are working with us. I'm pretty excited about our response and the opportunity to elevate the discussion to more in our community than just schools are responsible for this.
President Wagers.
Trustee Rajmandari.
Yeah, I agree, Trustee Gregory, that I think, the more people we can bring in, the better. I do think ultimately, though, when deaths happen of students or staff, that is a burden on our schools. And regardless of the level of engagement that we're seeing in the community, that's something that we have to deal with. And I think what we've seen, with the low opt-in rate for the mental health assessment, for example, like the level of response that we're getting in the community, so awesome that we can partner with St. Luke's and the city, is too low to meet the need. I guess I'm curious, maybe for Superintendent Dennis, what role the board can play, both in giving the district, as much as it needs to get through this crisis and prevent the next one, but also to support that community outreach and bring in all those stakeholders.
Superintendent Dennis.
President Wagers, Trustee Rajmandari, I think what you guys are doing as it stands right now is exactly what one of the things we need. We need awareness. We need a focus on the issues. We need patience as we spend some time doing the research so that we're not just throwing money at a problem, that we know exactly what we're trying to do. I think those issues the board needs to be supportive of. I think any time that you can encourage the community and families to get involved with Communities for Youth, I think is going to be a critical role in this. Because I think we all know that when the crisis is going on, everybody wants to come and help, but it's the sustained help is what we need. And so for the board, I think that keeping this at the forefront of what's going on in our community is going to be a critical role that the board can play. And then when we come as an administration to the board with recommendations on things we need to do, your support in that would be helpful. So that's the answer that I'd give right now. Trustee Rajmandari, I just appreciate the board and their willingness to have a tough conversation in a tough moment. Our community is hurting right now.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Shanks, any of the other presenters, do you have any comments on that question?
They don't.
Okay. My last question is about LGBTQ plus students who have the highest rates of suicide incidents, and I don't know the identities of. I was curious what we're doing to support LGBTQ plus students in our district and prevent suicide and depression, anxiety in those students in particular.
I think there's many different unique populations of students, and we are looking at everything we can do to support each population of students in the best way that we can. So to say that we're doing something very specific at this moment, any different for any population, I couldn't speak to that. So again, all of our options are open. We're looking at all the data, we're looking at all the risk factors, and we're taking that into account as we move forward.
There's no specialized programs for LGBTQ plus students.
I'm not sure what you mean by specialized programs.
For example, like GSA funding from at a district level, or sources of strength recruiting targeting LGBTQ plus students.
So every school looks at their population and then adjusts what they're doing at their individual schools for that population. So I can say numerous schools have GSA, yes. But again, it's based upon what the need is, what the population of those schools are, and then supporting those students where they're at. So if that's a need that's presented in those schools, absolutely, those students would hopefully be being supported.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Would say difficult presentation, but well done. And we're never going to do enough. I mean, what it comes down to. But what we are doing is we're putting a teacher, an administrator, staff members in contact with students on a daily basis. And we're touching those lives every day. And no other organization in our city does that in the same way that the school district does. And sometimes it's incredibly difficult. It's hard to go out on a crisis team month after month, that wears on you and it wears on the school. So I appreciate all that you're doing to do the best for our students' mental health and parents, because I know we're working with parents on a regular basis as well. But just thank you. I mean, I guess is what it comes down to, but there's still more work to be done, as there always will.